The most important thing about Andy Burnham's sudden rise is not one old photograph, one awkward social media post, or one carefully staged speech in a black t-shirt. The real story is the gap between the image being sold to the public and the record people are now being asked to forget. In the space of a few weeks, Burnham moved from being presented as the familiar man of the North to being treated as a national answer to Labour's crisis, and that kind of transformation does not happen by accident. It happens through branding, discipline, friendly media coverage, and a very deliberate attempt to tell voters what they are supposed to feel before they have had time to examine what has actually happened. His victory in Makerfield, recorded by Parliament in June 2026, became more than a constituency result. It became the step that pushed him into Westminster at exactly the moment Labour needed a new national figure.
To go through insiders, and I'm also bringing in John Hannam, the independent reporter and journalist who works for Urban Scoop, who slams Burnham as another Fabian and just a bad actor. Let's get down to this. So context is key.
And once he emerged as Prime Minister, the same old machinery came alive, softened the edges, polished the story, turn a long-serving Labour politician into something more homespun, and hope the public accepts the new packaging without asking too many questions. But this is why the old material matters, not because every casual picture from a politician's younger or looser days is a scandal. People have private lives, people have social lives, and a few unflattering images should not automatically become a political crisis. The issue is different. The issue is whether the public is being shown a real person or a manufactured character. When a politician's team begins scrubbing, curating, and narrowing the image at exactly the moment that politician becomes more powerful, voters are entitled to notice. They are entitled to ask why the rougher, messier version of the politician is being hidden, while the clean, approachable, northern, everyman version is pushed to the front of the stage. That question becomes sharper because Burnham is not arriving in national politics as a blank page. He has been in the Labour world for decades. He served in government under Gordon Brown. He built a reputation around public services, health, devolution, transport, and local identity. And he spent years as Mayor of Greater Manchester. His supporters point to that record and say it proves he understands communities outside London. They say he has a plain-speaking style that Labour badly needed after the managerial, cautious atmosphere of the Starmer years. They argue that he can talk about football, trains, care, housing, local pride and working class identity in a way that sounds less scripted than Westminster politics usually does. But critics see the same record very differently. To them, Burnham is not an outsider at all. He is Labour establishment through and through, a politician trained inside the same party structures, the same think tank culture, the same policy assumptions, and the same state-first instincts that have shaped British politics for years. They hear Man of the North and see a rebrand. They hear new direction and see an old Labour figure given a new costume. That is why the timing of the rebrand has created so much suspicion.
Yeah, let's have a watch of this now.
Andy Burnham, I just want to ask you on behalf of survivors of the grooming gangs, do you think you've done enough? Let me tell you, on behalf of children that were raped and failed, you haven't done enough, and that is why people are backing Restore. Thank you, Andy Burnham.
When a politician who has spent years inside the system is suddenly sold as the people's corrective to the system, the public has every right to look underneath the slogan. The most serious criticism aimed at Burnham is not about image at all. It is about Greater Manchester, child sexual exploitation, and the painful question of accountability. In the original discussion, the criticism was made in very blunt and very personal terms, with opponents accusing Burnham of failing victims and allowing institutions to avoid proper responsibility. That anger did not come from nowhere. Greater Manchester has had a long and deeply troubling history of child sexual exploitation cases, including failures by police, councils, and safeguarding bodies to protect vulnerable children. Independent reviews found that children were failed, that warnings were missed, that victims were not always believed, and that agencies did not always act with the urgency or courage required. Burnham's defenders point out that he commissioned an independent review in 2017 after the BBC's reporting on Operation Augusta, and they argue that without that process, some of the failures would have remained buried. They also note that Greater Manchester Police and local authorities have since claimed major changes in practice with renewed investigations and wider efforts to identify suspects and support victims. But critics answer that commissioning reviews is not the same as delivering justice. They argue that the political class often uses inquiries as a pressure valve, announce a review, express sorrow, promise lessons will be learnt, and then allow years to pass while survivors remain exhausted and the public loses track of who was responsible for what. This is the heart of the charge against Burnham, and it has to be handled carefully. It is not responsible to state as fact that one politician personally caused abuse or deliberately blocked accountability, unless that has been proven. But it is entirely fair to say that many people, including campaigners and political opponents, believe the official response has never matched the scale of the failure. For them, Burnham's problem is not that he alone caused what happened.
That Andy Burnham would be running the country. So when I got back to the hotel after filming at 4 a.m, I decided to go through his social media because I knew that within hours of that by-election, the Fabians and the PR big cheeses would be wiping everything so you wouldn't be able to see what he is. So I'm just going to share some of these pictures, and again I just want to say a huge shout out to my ADHD for making my brain jump around and not stop, because I knew that this would happen, and at 4 a.m, after filming for about 15 hours, I thought, shall I sleep or shall I do this? And here we have the evidence. So these are all the images that are now what?
It is that he became the face of a region where the failures were so severe, and then, in their view, moved upward without giving the country the level of closure and accountability it deserved. Survivors and whistleblowers have spoken for years about being ignored, dismissed, or treated as inconvenient. Families have watched institutions apologize after the fact and still wondered why so few powerful people ever pay a real price for what went wrong. So when Burnham is presented as a compassionate national leader, his critics ask a brutal question. If compassion is the brand, where was the visible, relentless, unmistakable reckoning for the children who were failed? Supporters will say that is unfair and that he helped expose the problem rather than conceal it. Opponents will say exposure without consequences is not enough. That argument is now following him into Downing Street. There is another reason this issue keeps returning. It has become a test of who is allowed to be believed. For years, some victims, families, and local campaigners said they felt treated as a problem to be managed rather than as people to be heard. They believed the language of sensitivity, cohesion, and procedural caution sometimes became a way of postponing hard truths. Officials will argue that investigations must be careful, that evidence must be handled properly, and that broad accusations can harm justice. That is true. But for the public, the question is why caution so often seems to protect institutions before it protects victims. This is why the subject carries such emotional power in political commentary. It is not only about one set of cases in one region. It is about whether the British state can admit when its own instincts failed. Burnham cannot solve every historical failure with a speech from Downing Street.
What they want you to see. It's polished, isn't it? It's a suit. It's a smarter version of Andy Burnham. So I put this on social media. Take a look. Well, the Fabians have been working overtime, haven't they, to rebrand Man of the North, Andy Burnham. So at their Makerfield by-election, when I confronted Andy Burnham and told him what I thought and what many sane people think about him, I decided to go through his social media because...
But he can decide whether his government treats survivor accountability as a central national test or as an uncomfortable legacy issue best handled quietly in official reports. The grooming gangs issue also explains why some voters react so strongly to celebrity interventions and elite letters about tax. When former footballer Gary Lineker, musician Brian Eno, and other wealthy figures reportedly wrote to Prime Minister Burnham asking for millionaires to be taxed more, supporters treated it as a patriotic gesture. Their argument is simple. Britain has enormous social needs, from care for older people to public services under strain, and people with very high wealth can afford to contribute more. They say a serious country should not be afraid to ask the richest to help repair the social fabric. On paper, that is an argument many voters may be willing to hear, especially when social care remains one of the hardest and most expensive problems in British politics. Burnham himself has not ruled out tax rises to fund a settlement on care, and that fits with his wider reputation as a politician willing to defend a larger role for the state. But the public response is not only about spreadsheets, it is about priorities and trust. Many people look at wealthy celebrities calling for higher taxes and wonder why the same public figures often seem quieter on issues that feel more immediate to ordinary families: child protection, community safety, the pressure on housing, the cost of living, stretched schools, and the sense that public authorities are more comfortable lecturing citizens than answering them. That is why the Lineker letter became symbolically useful for Burnham's critics. It allowed them to paint a picture of champagne morality, wealthy people writing open letters about fairness, while ordinary people wonder whether their concerns are being filtered out of respectable debate. To be fair, wanting to pay more tax is not automatically hypocritical. If rich people genuinely believe the tax system should take more from those with the broadest shoulders, they are entitled to say so. In a democracy, that view belongs in the debate. But critics are also entitled to ask why voluntary generosity is not enough for people who say they personally want to contribute more.
Let me tell you, Andy Burnham will be worse than Keir Starmer. I know, you're thinking, how is that even possible? It's possible because Andy Burnham relies on celebrities like the Gallagher brothers, very much like how we've seen Sadiq Khan try and resonate with a younger audience by talking about Stormzy and Dave. You've got Andy Burnham, who's got some really thick celebrity friends. I'm sorry, my Oasis single's going in the bin now. The Gallagher brothers are utterly useless. The fact they are endorsing Andy Burnham. But he's trying to do this whole, oh, I'm not going to wear a suit, I'm going to wear jeans and a t-shirt because I'm the man of the people.
They are entitled to ask whether a wealth tax campaign is partly about moral performance, a way of signalling virtue while handing the actual decision to government. And they are entitled to ask why every major public problem so quickly becomes a demand for more revenue rather than a demand for better accountability from institutions already spending vast amounts of money. Burnham's political danger is that he now sits exactly in the middle of that argument. If he raises taxes, he will be accused of confirming every fear that he is a classic Labour tax and spend Prime Minister. If he avoids tax rises, he will disappoint the left and the wealthy progressives, now urging him to act. Either way, the man of the people image becomes harder to maintain once the bills arrive. Social care is the perfect example because everyone knows the system needs money, but nobody trusts the political class to tell the whole story. Families see elderly relatives trapped in hospitals because care packages are not available. Care workers are underpaid and exhausted. Councils say they cannot meet demand. The NHS ends up carrying pressure that belongs elsewhere. So when Burnham speaks about a care settlement, he is touching a real national wound. Yet the moment the answer becomes higher taxes, voters ask a second question. Where exactly will the money go? Who will measure whether it works? And what happens if the system takes more without improving? Britain has had too many promises where extra funding disappears into complexity and the public is later told that still more is needed. A serious social care reform would need more than a moral appeal from millionaires. It would need a clear settlement between the state, families, local authorities, care providers, and taxpayers. It would need transparency about costs and trade-offs. It would need to explain whether ordinary homeowners, pensioners, workers, and high earners are being asked to carry different burdens. If Burnham cannot provide that clarity,
Letter states, millionaires are a patriotic bunch. We love this country and we want it to succeed. Well, Gary Lineker, why don't you Yeah? Why don't you give some money to someone like Rhiannon White's mum, who is now facing life without her daughter because an unvetted took her life away, and her son is now growing up without a mother. Maybe you could give some money to Sammy Woodhouse to help offer mental health support to the thousands of boys and girls that have been failed by the establishment as they've covered everything up. These champagne socialists are truly dangerous. Now, I caught up.
The tax debate will become another symbol of a state that asks for trust after spending years exhausting it. The deeper problem for Burnham is that Britain is in no mood for another polished story. People have lived through years of promises that sounded reasonable when delivered by well-dressed politicians in controlled settings, only to discover later that the reality on the ground was uglier, slower, and more expensive. They were told institutions would learn lessons after safeguarding scandals. They were told police reform would rebuild trust. They were told immigration and asylum pressures would be managed competently. They were told public services could be rescued through reform. They were told the state could protect the vulnerable while also protecting the freedoms of ordinary citizens. And yet, across the country, there is a feeling that the same failures keep returning with different logos attached. That is why Burnham's old photographs, his new wardrobe, his celebrity friends, and his speeches all matter less than one central question. Is he going to govern with honesty, or is he going to govern through mood music? The British public has become very good at hearing mood music. It knows when a politician is trying to sound northern, moderate, compassionate, patriotic, radical, or humble. What people are less willing to accept now is the idea that tone can substitute for answers. The anger around Burnham also feeds into a wider anxiety about policing, terrorism, and civil liberties. In the original conversation, the discussion turned to the arrest of a group of people in connection with an alleged extreme right-wing terrorism threat around an Islamic religious event at Shrubland Hall in Suffolk. The Metropolitan Police said 12 people were arrested in July 2026 as part of a counter-terrorism investigation, and a 13th arrest was later reported. Police described the investigation as connected to a suspected threat to the UK Ijtima event, and the event was advised to close early. Several people arrested under terrorism powers were later released without charge, while other parts of the investigation continued.
You are a truth teller, a patriot, an independent journalist, and a fellow presenter at Urban Scoop. Welcome to my channel.
Hi Lauren, nice to see you again, and that's very, very kind of you.
So John, I went down the rabbit hole, didn't I? Before Burnham became PM, after Makerfield, I went through his social media, got all the pictures I knew that those little Fabian beeps would erase.
That sequence created two very different reactions. On one side, there were people who said police must act quickly when intelligence suggests a possible threat to life. In that view, the public would never forgive authorities if they ignored warning signs and something terrible happened. On the other side, civil liberties campaigners and right-wing commentators argued that the publicity around the arrests moved faster than the evidence the public was allowed to see. They asked whether dramatic language about many lives saved was justified before charges had been brought. They asked what happens to a person's reputation, family, job, and mental health when they are arrested under terrorism powers and then released without charge after days of national suspicion. Both sides of that argument touch a real concern. Britain does face genuine security threats, and police sometimes have to act before the public knows the full story. It would be reckless to pretend every terror-related operation is theatre, but it is also dangerous when counter-terrorism language becomes politically convenient. Once someone is publicly associated with terrorism, even briefly, the stain can be permanent. If the public later learns that some of the evidence was weaker than the headlines suggested, trust is damaged not only in that case, but in future cases where the threat may be very real. That is why political leaders need to be extremely disciplined in how they talk about ongoing investigations. They should not downplay risk, but they should also avoid turning arrests into political morality plays before the legal process has done its work. This matters especially in a country where people across the political spectrum already fear that speech, protest, and online commentary are being policed unevenly. If citizens start to believe that the state is more willing to use its hardest tools against one ideological group than another, the result is not safety. The result is a collapse of confidence. That fear is made worse by the wider debate about speech. In the United States, the First Amendment gives free expression a constitutional status that Britain does not have in the same form.
He is very much on the left of the party. He's probably the most left-wing Prime Minister we've had in 50 years, since Jim Callaghan, since the Callaghan government in the late 70s, because whatever you might think of Blair, he wasn't massively left-wing. He was more centrist and globalist. Brown, exactly the same. Starmer was useless, but he wasn't that left-wing. Burnham is very firmly on the left of the Labour Party, and he's, as I say, he's the most left-wing, most Fabianist Prime Minister we've had in 50 odd years. So although he's come in at the moment making lots of promises and fluttering his long eyelashes and trying to look the part, wearing his trendy black t-shirts, actually when we get down to the nitty-gritty of the policies he's going to bring in, he's going to raise taxes, he's going to spend more money.
In the UK, speech rights exist, but they are balanced against public order, harassment, hate speech laws, communications law, terrorism law, and other restrictions. Many Britons accept some of those limits, especially where direct threats or targeted abuse are involved. But the line between genuine harm and unpopular opinion has become one of the central battles of modern politics. People now ask themselves whether a badly worded social media post could cost them their job, trigger a police visit, or place them on some invisible list. Some of that fear is exaggerated by online drama, but not all of it is imaginary. High-profile arrests over speech, police visits over posts, and the heavy use of non-crime recording have created a perception that ordinary citizens are being monitored in ways that previous generations would have found shocking. That is why figures like Donald Trump and J.D. Vance enter the conversation even in Britain. For some British Conservatives, America represents a stronger free speech tradition, and they hope pressure from Washington might restrain European-style regulation. But relying on foreign politicians to defend British liberties is a strange position for a sovereign country to be in. If Britain wants free expression to survive, British institutions must decide to defend it themselves. There is also a media dimension to this. People are not only worried about the law, they are worried about who gets the benefit of the doubt. When one kind of protest is described as passionate and another as dangerous, when one kind of anger is contextualized and another is pathologized, viewers notice they may not read the legislation, but they hear the tone. They hear when presenters treat one community's fear as legitimate and another community's fear as embarrassing. They hear when a politician's warning is repeated as fact before the underlying evidence is clear. This is why trust in legacy media has become such a central part of the political story.
Funnily enough, I've made 2 or 3 videos about this, and I think it's something we need to keep hammering away at and can't let drop. What they did, what Shabana Mahmood did, what Keir Starmer did, it wasn't the weekend just gone, it was the weekend before. They arrested 12 people and they trumpeted all over the place that it was a far-right extremist plot. And Shabana Mahmood put a tweet out within 24 hours specifically saying many lives were saved by the actions of the police. They kept these people banged up for a week. I know one of the people that was banged up. He was at home when his door was kicked off with his 9-year-old child. They threw a smoke bomb into his house, pointed guns at him, handcuffed him, put the kid in care for 24 hours, and then they've now released him.
A public that believes journalists are acting as referees can accept hard truths more easily. A public that believes journalists are acting as participants will search for alternative voices, even messy ones, because at least those voices appear to be saying what official culture avoids. Burnham's government will benefit from sympathetic media coverage at first, but if that coverage sounds too protective, it could damage him more than help him. This connects directly with the European debate over so-called chat control. Privacy experts and digital rights campaigners have been warning for years that proposals to scan private messages, even when justified by the fight against child sexual abuse material, could undermine encryption and normalize surveillance of ordinary citizens. In July 2026, the European Parliament extended a temporary derogation that allows online platforms to continue voluntarily detecting and reporting child sexual abuse material, while the larger and more controversial Chat Control 2 negotiations continued. Supporters of the measures argue that children are being abused in online spaces and that technology companies cannot simply hide behind privacy while illegal material spreads. That is a serious argument. No decent society should ignore the exploitation of children, but critics fear that client-side scanning and similar technologies could turn every phone into a checkpoint, scanning private content before it is sent, and creating a framework that future governments could expand beyond the original purpose. The danger is not only what the law says today, it is what the architecture makes possible tomorrow. This is where the child protection argument becomes morally complex. The same people who demand accountability for grooming gangs and institutional failures may also oppose sweeping surveillance powers introduced in the name of protecting children. That is not necessarily a contradiction. A person can believe the state failed children in the physical world.
Hopefully we could have like adjoining cells so we can plan some content.
Don't tell my wife.
But do you think people like us are under attack, are under the microscope? My mum constantly is saying to me, am I going to be arrested for tweeting this? I said, no, mum, I'm quite sure I'm ahead of you in the queue. Do you think we're at risk?
Yes. I mean, to be honest, when I make videos now, I try and watch my words slightly carefully. I try and be as factual as possible. You're allowed to offer an opinion, but you do have to be a little bit careful with what you say. The topic I've just spoken about.
And still distrust the state with permanent access to private digital life. In fact, the two positions can come from the same instinct. Institutions should protect the vulnerable, but they should not be allowed to hide from scrutiny or accumulate power without limits. The danger is that governments use the most emotionally powerful causes to justify the broadest tools. If a minister says a law is for the children, anyone who raises privacy concerns can be painted as indifferent to abuse. If a police force says an operation prevented a far-right attack, anyone asking about evidence can be painted as soft on extremism. If a prime minister says tax rises are needed for care, anyone asking about waste can be painted as selfish. This is how democratic debate narrows. People stop arguing about policy and start arguing about whether they are good people. The cultural argument in the original discussion was just as charged. There was concern that Britain is losing its constitutional and Christian identity, that the monarchy is being quietly downgraded, that the Church of England's place in national life is weakening, and that politicians are more comfortable speaking the language of multicultural management than national continuity. This is a real feeling for many people, even if some of the claims made in heated online commentary go too far. Britain does have a monarchy. The King is supreme governor of the Church of England and is crowned within a Christian ceremony. The phrase defender of the faith remains part of the constitutional language around the monarch. At the same time, modern Britain is religiously diverse, and the monarchy has tried to present itself as respectful toward people of many faiths and of none. For some, that is a necessary expression of national unity in a changed country. For others, it feels like a slow retreat from the country's historic identity. The tension is not going away because it touches questions deeper than day-to-day politics. What is Britain? What holds it together? And who gets to decide which traditions remain central?
We could see a domino effect around the Commonwealth and then end up in America, which would truly put their First Amendment at risk. And the First Amendment must be protected at every single cost.
I think it's interesting because, yes, you'd like to think that Trump and Vance will stand up for free speech. How much influence they've got in the UK and the EU, I don't know. But I do think things are changing a little bit. The EU had a vote, I think about a week or so ago, on something called client-side scanning, which is a software technology they want to bring into all phones, which affects them.
Burnham's premiership will have to navigate that cultural pressure, whether he wants to or not. Labour leaders often prefer to talk about material issues: wages, care, transport, housing, the NHS, regional investment. Those things matter enormously. But voters do not experience national life only as economics. They experience it through symbols, rituals, language, schools, public ceremonies, police priorities, the visibility of religion, the tone of official statements, and the sense that some identities are celebrated while others are treated as embarrassing. When conservative critics say they fear the country is being remade without consent, they're not only talking about immigration numbers or faith communities, they're talking about a feeling that national memory is being managed from above by people who do not really like the old country they inherited. Progressives hear that and often respond that Britain has always changed, that inclusion is not erasure, and that a multi-faith society can still respect its history. Both arguments will be present throughout Burnham's time in office. The question is whether he can speak to voters who feel culturally displaced without dismissing them as bigots, while also avoiding the trap of treating minority communities as political props. That is also why the right-wing response matters. The original discussion ended with a long argument about whether the British right can ever unite Reform, Nigel Farage, Rupert Lowe, Restore, Ben Habib, Liz Truss, CPAC, Douglas Murray, Tommy Robinson, and other controversial figures all sit somewhere inside or near that fractured world. The names differ, but the strategic question is the same. Does the right try to become respectable enough for mainstream voters, or does it embrace the raw anger of the activist base? Farage has spent years trying to turn insurgent politics into electoral pressure, but his critics say he is too careful around establishment boundaries. Rupert Lowe and Restore are presented by some supporters as more uncompromising.
I think Europe is waking up. I think we are waking up. The only question is, will we be able to change things quickly enough?
Yeah, I mean, I think something I find really concerning is, for me, I always felt that we were protected because it was a constitutionally Christian country. We now see, head of the Home Office, Shabana Mahmood, has said that Islam is central to every decision, she makes in her life. And then we've got a king that's just touring around mosques, but is allergic to going into a church in the same kind of capacity since 2022. Do you think we will eventually look at it not being a constitutionally Christian country? We've seen
that it remains unclear whether that energy can become a broad national vehicle. Liz Truss has tried to speak about the permanent administrative state and the power of the bureaucratic establishment, but critics on her own side accuse her of still wanting controlled invitation-only rebellion. And then there are figures like Tommy Robinson, whose supporters see him as a working-class campaigner on issues the mainstream ignored, while critics point to his criminal record, inflammatory style, and the risks of tying any serious political movement to such a polarizing figure. The right's problem is that both fears are rational. If it excludes every controversial figure, it risks looking like a managed opposition that uses grassroots anger for votes but keeps actual grassroots voices at arm's length. If it embraces every controversial figure, it risks confirming the worst fears of moderate voters who might be dissatisfied with Labour but do not want politics to become a permanent street fight. This is not only about class snobbery, although class clearly plays a role. British politics has often treated polished accents, university credentials, and media respectability as proof of seriousness, while working class anger is treated as something to be studied, managed, or contained. That resentment is powerful. But resentment alone does not build a government. A movement that wants to replace Labour has to answer practical questions. Who leads? What is the programme? How are candidates selected? How are scandals handled? What are the red lines? And how does the movement prove it can govern more honestly than the people it condemns? Without those answers, uniting the right remains a slogan rather than a route to power. This is where Burnham may underestimate his opposition. The right does not need to be perfectly organised to hurt him. It only needs to keep returning to themes that many voters already feel. The sense that elites protect each other, that ordinary people are lectured rather than listened to.
If we want to retain our culture, our traditions, our links to the Church of England, our historical links to sort of everything we've done in the past, then we have to vote for a right-wing party. And I think we also probably have to hold our nose and just vote for whichever right-wing party looks like it's going to win. I know there's lots of doubts about Farage, lots of doubts about reform, and I have those doubts the same as everybody else. But it might be a case of the lesser evil. I'd rather have Farage as Prime Minister and Reform in charge than Andy Burnham and Labour. My personal preference would be Rupert Lowe and Restore, but are they going to be there? Are they going to be strong enough? Are they going to be in pole position quickly enough? I don't know.
That institutions apologise without changing, that the tax burden keeps rising, that free speech is being narrowed, and that national identity is being diluted by people who call any resistance nostalgia or prejudice. A disciplined conservative movement could turn those instincts into policy. A chaotic one can still turn them into pressure. That means Burnham's safest strategy is not simply to wait for his opponents to fight among themselves. His safest strategy is to take the underlying concerns seriously before they harden into a permanent anti-government mood. If he treats every critic as extreme, he will strengthen the very voices he wants to marginalise. If he admits where trust has been broken, he may at least begin to separate fair criticism from opportunistic outrage. For Burnham, the fragmentation of his opponents is an opportunity. If the right spends the next few years arguing over personalities, bans, conferences, and who counts as truly awake, Labour can present itself as the only serious governing force, even while public trust remains fragile. But Burnham should not mistake opposition chaos for consent. A divided opposition can still reflect a united mood. And the mood across much of Britain is distrust. People distrust the media because they believe stories are framed before facts are fully known. They distrust police messaging because they fear double standards. They distrust inquiries because they have watched failures stretch across years. They distrust celebrity politics because it often sounds morally confident from a distance. They distrust tax promises because every solution seems to end with ordinary people paying more. They distrust cultural lectures because they sense that national identity is being negotiated without them. Burnham's challenge is not simply to beat Farage, Lowe, or anyone else. His challenge is to prove that government itself can still tell the truth. That is why the social media rebrand matters more than it first appears. A few deleted or hidden images would normally be a small story.
Of the mainstream media without, the funds that the likes of Liz Truss have. And I feel like it all comes down to this snobbery as well.
It is, 100%.
You see Douglas Murray, privately educated, very smart man, but ultimately, I'd say Tommy is one of the smartest people I've ever met. And his political knowledge is, I don't think I've met someone as politically informed as him. But because he's got the accent and because, he was arrested for mortgage fraud or whatever. It's like everyone in that side wants to look down. And I think this is everything that is wrong with the bloody world at the moment.
But in this context, they become a metaphor for the entire political operation. The public sees the before and after. It sees the casual past cleaned up for the official future. It sees a politician who was once part of the old Labour machine presented as a fresh moral reset. It sees wealthy celebrities urging tax rises while working families wonder why their own worries never get the same sympathetic platform. It sees safeguarding failures acknowledged in reports, but accountability still feeling incomplete. It sees counter-terrorism raids reported with dramatic language and then watches suspects released without charge. It sees privacy laws justified by noble causes while digital rights experts warn about permanent surveillance. It sees a monarchy trying to balance faith and pluralism while parts of the public fear national identity is being softened into something vague. Each piece may be debated on its own, but together they create one larger story. Britain is tired of being managed. The fair version of the Burnham argument is this. He may well believe he can repair public services. He may genuinely think that social care needs a serious funding settlement and that wealthy people should contribute more. He may believe his record in Greater Manchester shows a willingness to confront difficult problems rather than avoid them. He may think his informal style is not a costume, but simply how he talks to people. And he may believe that the country needs a more communitarian, interventionist Labour government after years of drift. Those arguments deserve to be heard, but the critical version is equally important. His opponents believe he represents the same establishment instincts dressed in friendlier clothes. They believe he will raise taxes, expand the state, speak the language of compassion while avoiding the hardest accountability questions, and rely on media-friendly symbolism to soften public resistance. They believe the man of the North image is being used to sell policies that will be anything but rebellious. That is the battle now beginning. In the end, the question is not whether Andy Burnham once had awkward photos online, whether Gary Lineker wants to pay more tax, or whether right-wing commentators can agree with one another for 5 minutes.
Making a decision on someone based on their background rather than what they can offer, what they can do, what they can say, has got to be got rid of.
It's funny, I went to private school and total waste of money. I mean, truly, my spelling's atrocious, my grammar, all of that stuff. But I look at Tommy and I think he's far more educated than I am. Yeah. He has met far more people. And I'm trying not to get my grammar wrong now because I'm like, went to private school. But, he has insights about geopolitical areas that I have no idea about. And he learnt that through being educated on the ground. And I just think Liz Truss really messed up there. I think it's weak sauce. I think it's pathetic.
Those are surface level arguments. The real question is whether the British public is allowed to see politics clearly. If Burnham wants to be trusted, he has to do more than look approachable. He has to answer in detail what will happen on grooming gangs, accountability, social care funding, taxation, policing powers, online privacy, free speech, and national identity. He has to show that inquiries lead to consequences, that tax rises are not the automatic answer to every failure, that policing is firm but not politicized, that child protection is not used as a shield for mass surveillance, and that patriotism means more than a staged accent and a rolled-up sleeve. The country does not need another character in a political drama. It needs leaders who are willing to stop performing authenticity and start practicing honesty. Burnham's premiership is beginning with a carefully polished image. The test is whether there is enough truth underneath it to survive contact with the public.